Hello, this is of course Dr. Jimmy, and somewhere lurking in the somewhere, I don't know exactly where, perhaps under my desk getting ready to bite my foot, is the notorious Bob the Cat. And this lovely morning, well, at least it's morning here, you might be watching this at night for all I know, but then who am I to tell you what to do with your viewing habits? Just keep your pants on, it's not that sort of video. Anyway, anyway, this is a video of Horror Nights history. One of my videos on the history of Halloween Horror Nights 19, ripped from the silver screen. The 10th such video so far. It's taken way too long for me to get these out. Sorry about that. At any rate, that was a year that was themed entirely to motion pictures. All the sins of the cinema, delightfully presented in a series of macabre haunted houses. I've already covered 5 of them, and because this was one of the first really IP-heavy years, that is intellectual properties, for those of you who don't know what IP means, you think it, well, it's not that kind of video either. Yeah, what was that book? Yellow River by IP Freely. Yes. No. Let's not go there. Oh, oh my goodness. Unless we start talking about all those other marvelous library volumes like The Leopard's Revenge by Claude Balls. Oh well, never mind. That's 3rd grade humour. Let's not go back there. This is not a Republican debate, damn you. I digress, as usual, sorry. I try to remember what the hell I was going to say. All right, then. Yes, of course. A scintillating selection of cinematic delights, macabre. But again, as it was one of the first years that was heavy with the intellectual properties, I decided to start off with those houses primarily and get to the original houses. There were a couple of original houses last. So I've already covered houses based on the Universal Classic Monsters franchises, Dracula, Frankenstein, and The Wolfman. The reboots, remakes, one that was actually seen in films, and 2 that were Universal's own modern take on the 2 classic characters revised for Horror Nights. And then, of course, there was the one based on Saw and the one based on the Child's Play Chucky franchise. So, I now come to the last of those intellectual property houses which had more than one film presented within its collection, and it's called Silver Screams, which is also, of course, a house which featured the iconic character of the event, Julian Browning, the usher. Thus, Silver Screams was the latest at that time of a certain type of haunted house. You might say a sub-genre of the haunted houses, a particular which they have been doing over the years. That is a haunted house which is themed to not one but several different motion pictures, with various scenes from different motion pictures as you go through. I believe the first time they decided to do one of those was probably in the mid-90s with the Universal House of Horrors, Universal Museum of Horrors. They're doing those houses pretty much regularly from about 1995, I think, all the way to the year 2000, under different titles like Universal House of Horrors, New House of Horrors, Museum of Horrors, New Museum of Horrors, creature features in 3D, and I forget what the one was after that, something like Monster Mania or something. But all of them are pretty much a similar idea, having multiple scenes from classic Universal monster films as well as modern slashers in different alternating runs. And then, of course, prior to 2009, there were two very big, important houses in this sort of style, if you will, this subgenre, and that was the All Night Die-In in 2003 and the All Night Die-In Take 2 in 2006, both of which featured multiple scenes from different horror movies as you went through them, and both of which had something else in common with Silver Screams, is that they were also iconic houses. That is, the signature house for the icon of those years. In 2003, the director being the icon of that event, and in 2006, the director being one of four icons who appeared together in tandem, as you were. Therefore, this house would be quite similar in that regard. It would be featuring the multiple films and also be the icon house for the usher, the signature house. But there was always something about those previous houses, a sort of narrative weakness, a lack of cohesion, if you will. The presentation was a bit disjointed. It was a bit jarring, and it didn't flow. And part of that problem is, well, it's a random series of scenes from different films, and sometimes the films are quite different. Let me take as an example All Night Die-In Take 2. And, you know, they've been doing these for years, but let me to pick one of the Museum of Horror houses from, I think it's 98. You'd see a scene from Poltergeist, and then you'd have a scene from The Exorcist, and then you'd have a scene from Night of the Living Dead in black and white, gosh darn it, and then Candyman. And I think they even had a bit of The Shining in there, even though that's one that might surprise you, as Stephen King doesn't like to do horror nights, but I think they threw that in there anyway without getting the rights for it, but I'll get to that later. So they have all kinds of stuff like that, one after the other, bang, 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 bang. And it's not like this, you know, you go from one scene to the next, and suddenly you're in a completely different environment and a completely different film. It's a bit jarring as you go from room to room. In the same way, All Night Die-In Take 2. Okay, all right, it's Scream. Now it's Hellraiser. Now it's The Ring. Now it's Silence of the Lambs. It's the same sort of thing. It's like, holy crap, you know, it's like you don't know what to expect as you go from one room to the other, and it could be totally different. You could be in a dark room with twirling columns of body parts stuck together and so nastily rough-hewn together, and the Cenobites in their black leather, and all of the nails coming out of their heads, and nasty mutilations are there, you know, with a box, and we have such sights to show you. And next thing you know, in a room that's all pure white, with black and white, stark and white, and it's like there's the video images from Samara's video is on the wall, and the little girl's running around in her white with her black hair, and she's freaking you out with centipedes and floating what was this? Floating antique furniture going upside down, and ladders and things, and goats copulating. No, I skipped the last part. But whatever was in that damn creepy video that you watch it, and then 7 days later you're croaked. Whatever it is, all that stuff is flashing on the walls and weird shit like that. And it's like, how the hell? then suddenly you're in an asylum, and with a glass partition between you and Hannibal Lecter going on the other side of the thing, and it's like, what the hell? You know, it's a bit disjointed, and that's the thing, you see. It lacked narrative structure, and they saw how well it worked. The preceding year, they did a house which was also an anthology of sorts, but it wasn't horror films. It was fairy tales. You remember the preceding year, 2008. But of course, fairy tales are all within the same sort of realm. Not to copy or steal any ideas from a more recent ABC television program, but in a way there's sort of a fairy tale world, and yeah, they all can all be in that same world. In fact, they kind of stole the idea from scary tales, because in this, the Queen was indeed rewriting the fairy tales to give herself a happy ending. Of course, it was more interesting in the haunted house because she had her scribes doing the writing in weird runes on the actual flesh of victims. But but that whole idea of the Queen kind of tied all of these things together in a way that it wasn't so disorienting going from one scene in a different story to a next scene, and they gave it a narrative cohesion. They needed some sort of not just wrap around, but not just have a scene at the beginning and a scene at the end to tie it together, but to have something flowing through the whole thing to tie it together, a thematic narrative. And they worked it out. After many years of doing the same sort of house, they came up with a way of doing that with Silver Screams. And that was, you're not just going from scene to scene randomly, different horror movies, you're actually visiting a Universal Palace Theatre itself. You know, the cinema, the Universal Palace Theatre, was almost an icon in of itself that year. It's gloriously presented on the website in all its spectacular grandeur, and a model that they created for the website. I mean, they really went into it, and so they created a structure by which you would enter the cinema and you weren't just going randomly from one film to the other. It wasn't like, say, you had 2 or 3 television channels at the same time showing an all-night horror movie marathon, and you just sit there with your remote going click, 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 and so there's different thing on the, you know, that's not what it's going to be like this time, because what it is it's like you're going through the cinema, and then you will leave one, and for some reason it's turned into a multiplex, as you go out of one room and go into the hallway, that leads you to the next screen, and as you go through there, you're in the cinema again. So you don't just go from movie to movie to movie. You go from the cinema into a film, and then back to the cinema, and then back to inside another movie, and then back to the cinema, the theater itself, and then you go back. So that you're in a corridor of the cinema, and also what it does is it allows them to present what the next film scene is going to be. Because as you're in the theatre hallway, cinema corridor, it depends on what country you're in, you go to the red curtains and stuff, and you come up to a poster placard, like they have in the lobbies, you know, the coming attractions. You go to a lobby, you see the little posters up on the walls to tell you what's coming up later, or even right up by the doors of, in some of the more old-fashioned ones, they might have them there so you know what you're going to see as you go in. And it has a poster of the actual film itself. Oh, that's what you're going to see. So it's not like it's going to take you by surprise. You go into the room, you already know what movie it is because you just saw the poster outside. And they even put some little props, in some of the cases, little props sit on a seat outside the door, so you can, oh, look, that's what it's going to be. And then you go inside, and there you are, in the scene from the film. And then when you leave that, you go back into one of those cinema hallways again, and then you see another poster and some more props, so you know what the next film is going to be. And that way, it wasn't as disjointed. It wasn't, you know, you flow through the cinema. And furthermore, there was a narrative structure beyond that, which I'll get to, which involved the backstory of the usher himself. You didn't learn anything about who the director was and why the director was in the all-night dying houses. And it really didn't fit his backstory. It had nothing to do with the creepy European filmmaker doing snuff films and having his weird little studios underground or whatever he did those. No, it was like just, standard horror movies, and he was at the beginning and at the end, and that was it. But this one, you got an idea of who Julian Browning is and why he is who he is, and part of his obsession. Part of that it fit in with the backstory of the character. So they did a really good job of doing that whole thing. So it was a much better house, I think, than any of the previous movie houses of this sort, because they created a whole story out of it. It wasn't just the random scenes from horror films, although they had some lovely scenes from the horror films and done quite remarkably, because they really recreated the sets and the characters brilliantly from all the different features. Now, another thing that has evolved over the years with this kind of house is the whole intellectual property process had been evolving. It hadn't quite become what it is today, but as you may recall, back in the 90s, when they used to do these sorts of houses, they didn't bother getting any intellectual property rights. They just throw in the characters people would recognize. Oh, it's the Ghostface Killer. Oh, it's Freddy Krueger. Oh, it's Jason. It's Leatherface. What have you. Because they figured no one would really care. It's only a temporary Halloween event. And back in the 90s, it might be only going on for a couple of weeks. And then all of a sudden it's gone. And by the time a lawyer gets mad and writes a letter, the event's already over. Ha ha, done. Bye-bye. And they didn't actually put placards out with the names of the movies or anything. They didn't say, and now Freddy Krueger from Nightmare on Elm Street. No, they didn't do that. In fact, even when they cast the actors, they'd say Nightmare Man or, Killer with Glove or something like that. They wouldn't actually call them by their name in any place on paper. They were cleverer than that. But it wasn't, they didn't think it was that big of a deal. And this had been common practice in haunted attractions around the country, especially the ones for Halloween that were temporary. That's why it always amused me no end in the mid-1990s to see, say, Michael Myers or the Ghostface in these houses, or see them around, because at that time, of course, Dimension controlled both of those characters, which was a division of Miramax, which was at that time, the mid-90s, a division of Disney. And I used to say, oh my God, to see these guys here that really belong to here at Universal, and not down the street over at the, and of course they would never do them. And I said, if they ever had the balls at Disney to have something that isn't not so scary, but something that's really scary, they had all these things they could use right there, but they never did. So why not let Universal take them? Ha ha ha. That's what I always felt. But again, it was done quick and dirty. It was done behind the scenes, under the table, whatever you want to call it. They never really had to bother with that. But of course, as the event became more and more prominent and more successful, because of the success, then all of a sudden it's not just 2 weeks, it's 4 weeks, it's a month, it's 2 months, it expands and expands and expands. This upcoming event in 2016 will be running for 31 nights. 31 nights, that's the most ever. Starting as early as September 16th, good God, and going all the way to Halloween night. But that's amazing. So the time that it's expanded has gotten more and more and more. It's just like these videos, how long it takes me to talk about one freaking haunted house. And it looks like it's going to take more than one video at the rate I'm going. But in the same regard, when they got to a bit later, they did the all-night die-in houses, that's when they first began to notice they couldn't just do it that way anymore. In 2003, it was no problem. They did the same thing then, and in 2006 they thought they could get away with it. But then all of a sudden, they get some notices from whichever company it was that made The Ring. I think it's 20th Century Fox, but I don't remember for sure. I could go over there to my stacks of DVDs and Blu-rays and stuff and pull the video out and look at it like I did yesterday, and I could tell you immediately. But I don't want to bother because I don't want to get up. But anyway, it was whatever company it was, they were pissed because of that little scene with Samara in that house. Now, I don't know exactly what happened because that was the year I only went once to the event. I only went once in 2006. And so I went through that house that opening night and I saw that scene, but apparently sometime after that they had to make some changes because of some copyright issues, trademark issues, rights issues. I don't know what they did, if they took the girl out of the room or they changed the scene slightly or what. I'm not quite certain what they did because there were some personal events going on at that time in my household that I had to be addressed that were more important, and so I only was able to go to Horror Nights that opening night in 2006. And so I haven't really gone back to find out exactly, but I knew there was some sort of issue. And then the following year, of course, that's when they started for the first time to negotiate with the outside studios, with other companies, when they brought Freddy, Jason, and Leatherface in and had a real contracted deal with New Line Cinema. And so 2 years later, in 2009, when they bring in their IPs, they have a contracted deal with Lionsgate for Saw. But just about all the other IPs were controlled by Universal. They hadn't yet reached a point where they would start contracting with multiple businesses and many other companies and bring in several IPs from outside into the event. Most of what you saw was still Universal, and except for Saw and My Bloody Valentine. And I'll get back to that point when I start again, because it's already past 20 minutes now.